The Galactic Confederation had known peace for millennia. Comprised of thousands of species from across the stars, its foundation was built upon diplomacy, reason, and mutual cooperation. War had long been deemed primitive, an unfortunate relic of uncivilized eras. Conflicts were settled through negotiations, disputes through mediation. The idea of violence as a means to an end was as foreign as a world without gravity. That delicate balance was upended the moment humans were discovered. The first contact team arrived at Earth with tempered optimism. Their mission was simple: observe, make peaceful introductions, and assess the viability of humanity as a potential member of the Confederation. The diplomatic vessel, Verdant Harmony, descended unnoticed in the shadow of Earth's moon before dispatching an observation probe. For 3 weeks, the team of scholars, scientists, and seasoned ambassadors observed the species from orbit. What they found defied comprehension. Ambassador Xath, a Drellic with centuries of interstellar experience, watched a holoscreen with mounting unease. He had studied first contacts before, prepared for the expected anomalies that came with unfamiliar cultures. Yet nothing had prepared him for what he was witnessing. "Replay that last segment," he instructed, his voice tight with disbelief. The holoscreen flickered, displaying footage of a gathering of humans in an enclosed arena. Thousands of them roared in unison as 2 of their kind battered each other senseless in a caged enclosure. Blood splattered, bones snapped, and still the crowd cheered. When one combatant fell unconscious, the other stood over him, howling in triumph. The announcer, an excitable human with an almost manic enthusiasm, declared the victor, and the crowd erupted into a frenzy of approval. Xath turned to his aide, a junior researcher named Veleth, whose normally tranquil complexion had turned an unhealthy shade of gray. "Explain," he demanded. "It appears to be a ritualistic combat sport," Veleth murmured. "A form of entertainment." "Entertainment?" Xath's mouth tightened. "They enjoy watching their own kind suffer?" Veleth hesitated before answering. "Not just suffering. There's a strategic element, a test of endurance, skill, and—" He struggled to find the right words. "Determination?" Xath exhaled sharply, refocusing on the display. The probe had gathered an exhaustive amount of data: historical records, societal norms, technological advancements. Yet the deeper he examined, the more troubling the findings became. Humanity's history was riddled with war. Not mere skirmishes or territorial disputes, but total wars, global in scale. They had fought each other with an almost obsessive fervor, developing increasingly efficient ways to kill. Their weapons of mass destruction defied all logic. They had harnessed the power of the atom not for energy, not for advancement, but to fashion bombs capable of annihilating entire cities. And yet, somehow, they had survived. "Look at this," Veleth said suddenly, pulling up a new feed. A human, a civilian, not a soldier, stood atop a thin, metallic rope suspended between 2 towering buildings, balancing with nothing but his own outstretched arms. Far below, hundreds of humans watched in awe, as though the act was not one of sheer madness. Xath's tendrils curled in disbelief. "What? Perhaps it is a test of physical mastery?" Veleth ventured. "They seem to willingly engage in risky behavior." Another screen displayed humans plunging into deep oceans with only a thin supply of air, diving into waters teeming with massive, carnivorous predators. Another clip showed humans flinging themselves from aircraft, plummeting toward the ground at terminal velocity before deploying thin sheets of fabric to break their fall. "Are they suicidal?" Xath muttered. "No," Veleth said. "They appear exhilarated." Before Xath could respond, a sharp chime signaled an incoming transmission. The face of High Chancellor Zelvorin, leader of the Confederation's diplomatic corps, appeared before them, his many eyes scrutinizing them with grave intensity. "Report," Zelvorin commanded. Xath took a steadying breath. "The humans are—" He hesitated. He had encountered many civilizations in his time, yet he struggled to encapsulate what he had just witnessed. "They are unlike anything we have encountered." Zelvorin's gaze sharpened. "Clarify." They are reckless, fearless, even in the face of mortal peril. Their entertainment revolves around violence. Their history is dominated by warfare. They invent ways to test their own endurance, pushing themselves to the brink for no reason beyond proving that they can. Veleth added cautiously, yet they are highly adaptable, incredibly resilient. They endure hardships that would cripple most species, yet they persist. They seem to thrive in adversity. Zelvorin studied them for a long moment. Do they pose a threat? Xath considered his words carefully. A direct threat? No, but they are unpredictable. Their methods, their motivations, their very instincts are beyond reason. If we do not approach them carefully, I fear the consequences. Zelvorin sighed. Our council has voted. We extend the invitation. Xath stiffened. With all due respect, Chancellor, that may not be wise. It is done, Zelvorin said. Proceed with contact. We must hope that these humans are not as uncontrollable as they seem. The transmission ended, leaving the observation chamber in heavy silence. Xath exhaled slowly before turning to Veleth. Prepare the landing party, he said grimly. Let us see if the humans truly are as insane as they appear. The Galactic Confederation had never known war. True war, the kind that burned across the stars, leaving only ruin in its wake. Disputes, of course, had occurred. Border skirmishes, economic conflicts, the occasional diplomatic misstep that required careful mediation. But war, in the human sense of the word, was something the Confederation had eradicated eons ago. And then the Xarnax invaded. They came without warning, a tide of living metal and unrelenting brutality. The Confederation, built upon diplomacy and trust, had no defenses capable of withstanding the assault. Entire planets fell within days, their governments unable to comprehend the sheer aggression of the attack. The Xarnax did not negotiate. They did not issue demands. They simply advanced, conquering and consuming, their fleets blotting out the stars. The Confederation did what it had always done in times of crisis. They convened, deliberated, and sought peaceful resolution. By the time they realized there would be none, it was almost too late. Their fleets, designed for patrol and defense, were shattered in the first engagements. The Xarnax did not fight as they did, not with careful formations and strategic retreats, but with overwhelming, relentless force. And so, with desperation clawing at their throats, the Confederation turned to the only species they knew could fight, the only species that had ever terrified them. They turned to humanity. The request for aid was met with an immediate response. Not with hesitation, not with demands for negotiation, but with grim resolve. Humanity did not ask why the war had begun. They did not seek to understand the Xarnax's motives. They only asked for coordinates. Commander Elias Voss stood aboard the bridge of UNSC Wrath, staring at the holographic display of the battlefield. The remnants of a Confederation fleet were breaking apart under the unrelenting assault of the Xarnax. Ships, sleek and pristine, built for diplomacy and deterrence, crumbled like brittle leaves against the storm. Voss exhaled, his breath steady despite the chaos unfolding before him. Open a channel to all human forces. A chime signaled the connection, linking every warship, every squadron, every soldier preparing for battle. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice calm, measured. The Confederation calls this an invasion. We call it Tuesday. A ripple of laughter echoed through the channel, sharp and eager. You know the drill. The Xarnax fight with brute force. They expect us to break. They think we fear death. He leaned forward, his eyes cold and unyielding. They have no idea who we are. Across the fleet, weapons powered up, thrusters roared to life, and thousands of soldiers readied themselves. Humanity had been at war with itself for centuries. They had fought over borders, ideologies, resources. They had burned continents, scarred worlds, and in the process, forged something that no other species in the galaxy could understand. They had learned to love the fight. The human fleet descended upon the Xarnax like a predator falling upon its prey. The first engagement shattered the enemy's vanguard, their rigid formations unable to adapt to the erratic, ruthless efficiency of human warfare. Confederation officers, watching from the safety of their command centers, recoiled in horror as they witnessed the madness unfold. Human pilots weaved between enemy fire, their evasive maneuvers not dictated by logic, but by instinct, by something primal and unquantifiable. Entire squadrons vanished into the darkness of space, only to reappear behind enemy lines, tearing through the Xarnax with terrifying precision. Soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned, fought in boarding actions that defied every rule of engagement. They did not retreat when wounded. They did not surrender when surrounded. They adapted, they resisted, they laughed in the face of death. Aboard the Verdant Harmony, Ambassador Xath watched the battle unfold with growing unease. He had known humans were dangerous. He had studied their wars, their history of unrelenting survival. But this was something else. "They're pushing the Xarnax back," Velith whispered, awe creeping into his voice. Xath's tendrils twitched. "They're not just pushing them back," he said. "They're toying with them." The Xarnax were relentless, but they were also predictable. Their tactics relied on overwhelming force, on breaking their enemies through sheer numbers and unyielding pressure. Against any other species, it had been a perfect strategy. But against humans, it was a mistake, because humans thrived under pressure. In the chaos of battle, a Xarnax warlord transmitted a desperate order. "Break them, crush their morale." The response came from a human marine, his voice laced with amusement. "Morale? Buddy, I haven't slept in 36 hours. I'm covered in someone else's blood, and I just watched my buddy take a railgun to the chest and keep fighting. You can't break us." The Xarnax, for the first time in their history, hesitated. Days turned into weeks, and the tide of war shifted. The Xarnax, once unstoppable, found themselves on the defensive. They had no counter to the sheer unpredictability of human strategy, no response to an enemy that fought not just with weapons, but with a terrifying, reckless joy. In one decisive battle, a Xarnax dreadnought faced off against a vastly smaller human strike force. The Confederation had predicted certain defeat, but the humans had other plans. A single human frigate, critically damaged, accelerated directly toward the dreadnought's bridge. Every rational species would have evacuated. Every logical commander would have surrendered. Instead, the human captain grinned, saluted his crew, and broadcast a single message: "See you in hell." The explosion that followed shattered the dreadnought in half. The battle ended in moments. The war, for all intents and purposes, was over. The Xarnax retreated, their invasion force broken, their will to fight crushed. Not by superior numbers, not by technological advancements, but by something far more terrifying. By sheer, unrelenting insanity. As the war ended, the Confederation found itself facing an unsettling reality. The humans had saved them, but at what cost? They had witnessed something ancient and primal, something no amount of diplomacy or reason could control. And as Xath watched a squad of human soldiers laughing, celebrating their victory as though they had simply won a friendly game rather than survive the deadliest war in recorded history, he felt a deep, creeping unease. They had invited humanity into the Confederation, and now they would have to live with them. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. What remained of the Xarnax armada had fled beyond known space, their once unbreakable forces reduced to scattered remnants. The Galactic Confederation, a civilization that had known only peace for millennia, stood in the uneasy silence that followed. They had won, or rather, humanity had won for them. And now, the Confederation had to grapple with what that truly meant. On the diplomatic world of Aerith Prime, the council chamber was filled with a nervous energy. The representatives of 100 species had gathered, their voices hushed, their movements uneasy. The air smelled of ozone and tension. At the center of the room, the great circular table stood occupied by the highest-ranking officials in the galaxy. Ambassador Xath had not spoken in nearly an hour. He simply watched as the debate unfolded, his gaze flicking between the different species as they voiced their concerns. Some, like the cautious Valtari, argued for immediate containment. Others, particularly the grateful Zelka, spoke of honoring their new allies. But the undercurrent of fear was undeniable. They are unstable, hissed Chancellor Vyrek, his mandibles clicking in agitation. We have all seen the reports. They enjoy combat. They seek danger. If they were to turn their aggression upon us, we would lose, said a deep voice. Silence fell over the chamber as the human's representative leaned forward. Admiral Elias Voss was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. He had fought on the front lines, led fleets through the fires of war, and stood unmoving in the face of horrors that had shattered lesser beings. Now, he regarded the assembled species with a quiet patience, as if waiting for a child to finish a tantrum. You're afraid, Voss said simply. I get it. You've never had to deal with something like this before. You're wondering what happens when the thing that saved you is something you don't understand, something you can't control. Xath's tendrils twitched, but he said nothing. Voss gestured vaguely. So, and now you're talking about restrictions, about keeping us in check. Maybe you think we don't belong in the Confederation at all. He leaned back, folding his arms. I won't try to change your minds. I just want you to think about something before you make your decision. The chamber remained silent. You needed us, Voss continued, his voice steady. Not just our weapons, not just our soldiers. You needed what we are. The reason we won isn't because we had better ships or bigger guns. It's because we refuse to lose. Because when everything is on fire and falling apart, humans don't break. We don't give up. We adapt. We endure. He let his words settle before shaking his head. You see that as a threat. I see it as the only reason you're all still standing. The silence stretched long and thin. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, Xath placed his hands on the table. His voice, when he spoke, was measured. Admiral Voss, tell me honestly, do you believe humanity will ever change? Voss smiled, but there was no humor in it. Not in the way you want us to. The council deliberated for hours. By the time the decision was reached, the weight in the room had only grown heavier. Humanity would remain part of the Confederation, but there would be conditions. Oversight, policies to ensure that their enthusiasm for war did not spiral beyond control. It was a compromise, an uneasy one, but a necessary one. And yet, Xath could not shake the feeling that they had made an irreversible choice. Outside the chamber, as he walked through the towering crystalline halls of the capital, he found Voss waiting for him. The human regarded him with an expression that was almost amused. You're thinking we're a mistake, Voss said, as if reading his mind. Xath exhaled slowly. I am thinking, he said carefully, that the galaxy has never known a species like yours, and that now that it does, things will never be the same. Voss chuckled. You're not wrong. Xath hesitated before asking, what happens if another war comes? If the next enemy is not the Xarnax, but something even worse? Voss's expression turned unreadable. Then you'll be glad we're on your side. The human turned and walked away, his posture easy, his steps unhurried. As Xath watched him go, he realized something unsettling. The Confederation had always believed themselves to be the pinnacle of civilization, sophisticated, enlightened, evolved beyond the need for violence. But perhaps they had simply been waiting for something to fight for. And now, with humanity among them, they would never have to wait again.